I'd like to thank the Minister for welcome the Minister to the House and thank him for bringing this bill, but I'd also feel it really is appropriate to thank Senator Bacic because fundamentally this piece of legislation is part of a whole suite of legislation looking at the intersection between gender equality and employment rights, which Senator Bacic has brought through these houses, including the very important legislation on collective bargaining and indeed her new proposals in respect of a reproductive rights leave. And I think it's appropriate to acknowledge that, because I think it is an example of taking two equality issues and looking deeply at how they can intersect and how we as legislators can address them both together. There are areas in Senator Bacic's legislation which I believe are stronger than this legislation, and I do think there's going to need to be, I understand many of the principles have been taken, but I think an excessively cautious approach. Cautious, I would say, not in terms of impact, but cautious in terms of timing and in terms of strength of impact and in terms of scope of impact has been taken throughout this bill. And I join with others in saying that frankly the idea of waiting 3 years before we look to employees of 150 or less is not acceptable at all. And it's taking place, Minister, I would bear in mind, not simply in the situation where we were a couple of years ago when we were debating the original legislation, which has had very long debate and lots of scrutiny, but also in the context of we have a new Citizens' Assembly which has made really clear recommendations and set hard timelines for the kind of gender equality they want to see in our workplaces. And we're also taking place, this bill is coming through at a moment post-COVID, at the brink of just transition, when we are seeing a huge amount of companies restructuring, reorganising themselves, the potential rise in remote working, and it's really important that they get things right from the beginning. And that part of them getting things right, their environmental report, looking at how they use remote working and ensure that it doesn't, for example, damage opportunities for progression, but that they think things through, is that they would be reporting on the gender pay equality issues. So frankly, Minister, I'd urge that perhaps as this goes through committee and report stage, you would reduce that 3-year period downwards to allow for this to be meaningful and to allow for this to be at least in tune with the moment we're in, if not ahead of it. I'd also note and agree with the concerns of the many places in the bill where we talk about regulations may be made and may prescribe, and I know that that may be a choice in drafting, but I do think it's important that there is certainty and predictability, and in that context I say would be more appropriate, so that we don't have an incremental piece, again arguing for the delay in these being brought in, because we've only tried it this way for a while and we changed it there for a while, and now we're only finally producing regulations in one of the aspects. It really needs to start strongly and with intent and with clarity. I want to highlight a few areas that I believe might need further strengthening within the bill. There's aspects that I think are really good. I welcome that the median is being discussed about in terms of hourly remuneration. I think that's really important. I also welcome that there's an identification of certain different kinds. There is a recognition, for example, of temporary contracts and temporary employees, and I think that's going to be really important. We need to make sure this legislation works for all kinds of employees and that it catches the facts of more insecure working style contracts for many women in our workplaces, and I think that's important. I am concerned that we may not be catching it at the top. So in relation to, while bonuses are addressed, I'm not clear to me if benefits in kind, for example, will capture the situations we're seeing increasingly where shares are being given as part of a remuneration package. And I think that would be important, that that would be caught and monitored. And indeed, some of the particular privileges and measures that are given to special assignees. We need to be looking at the gender equality at that level in the workplace as well, and making sure that that is captured. I welcome the fact again that there is at least a snapshot whereby there's a requirement for reporting on the numbers of staff at each quintile within a workplace. I think that that would be good. That's good. I feel there's something still around progression. And that's why being clearer about the times in which this reporting will take place are important. And that's something that's been really key to the success of, for example, the Athena Swan programme within our university systems, is that it really charts and requires evidence of progression. So rather than just a disappointing snapshot from time to time, but it shows where is the movement between different levels and what addresses are there. And as Senator Warfield said, there's lots of reasons in terms of the gender pay gap, but they're not excuses. They are problems to be tackled, that they identify, and it is, yes, around less women being promoted into higher paid roles. It is about missing rungs of the ladder for women climbing within organisations, but it's also around certain kinds of work being undervalued compared to other kinds of work. So there's a number of issues to tackle, and for this to be effective, we need that this legislation is not just a snapshot, but that it really is giving us arrows towards sectoral changes, because some of the changes will be really specific to specific sectors, and to the wider kind of national and legislative changes that we need to take to tackle these issues. Again, Minister, I welcome the bill. I look forward to engaging on it. I think there are a few areas that may need strengthening and loopholes, and I think we also need to show seriousness about this, and indeed passion about implementing it, and that's why I would urge that this bill be reviewed maybe by your office with just the thought of, if we wanted this to really send the strongest possible signal, how would we strengthen it? And I think there's some very good ideas in Senator Batchick's original legislation in that regard, and there's also some good ideas from our Citizen Assembly. I'm going to finish early in order to facilitate colleagues.